Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Million Dollar Body Podcast, the intersection of physical health, financial success, and time freedom and adventure. Right here, we are so excited to dive in with the Knife Mensch himself, the myth, the man, the legend, Jared Farber. Now, Jared, I'm excited to talk to because he is an incredibly busy dude. He's had a lot going on for the last several years, a lot in the way of his business, in the way of his family, some moves here and there. But he's still managed to prioritize his health and fitness and drop 60 pounds. So I'm really excited to see what's been really working for Jared. How has he been able to do that? And then what lessons does he have for the rest of us? So Jared, welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. Excited to be here. It's an honor. It's an honor.
Awesome. So just can you get us started a little bit? Tell us a little bit about your background, kind of like, who are you? What do you do for work? Why did you bother to get in shape? What was that like? What was important about that for you?
Yeah, so my background, I'm originally from Cincinnati area. Growing up around high school, I really got into playing hockey. I'm actually a goalie. So I really got into that. And so as a large part of my life, it kind of defined me. I ended up going from Cincinnati to upstate New York at RIT studied industrial engineering. During that time, I also got involved with Cutco. So learning how to sell Cutco as a sales rep, and then also getting into some management as well. And I've just kind of stuck with that over the years.
Cool.
One
So
thing
Cutco's
learned,
like if anyone doesn't know, Cutco is
go
like
ahead.
direct sales, so you're talking to people all the time. You're going out, you're having to create conversations. It's not like, hey, just like sit back and take orders, right? So I know that can be a crazy experience. I sold books door to door. Do you have like a favorite story or like the most like wild story from your Cutco experience you want to share with us?
Um, Nothing wild really comes to mind right now, but what does come to mind are some of my favorite experiences. One of the things I've really loved is just being able to sit down with people over the years and connect. I always remember the times where not only do people invite me into their homes to show the product, but they also invited me for a meal, right? And so when you sit down and break bread with people, it's a very special experience, because you're really connecting at a much deeper level, which is always my thing. One of the big things about me is I'm very authentic. That's very important to me, to just show up as I am, who I am, and what's going on. So I think a great example of that is simply like when someone says, "Hey, how's it going?" What's the generic response is like, "Oh, I'm good, I'm fine." But like, what is that? That's not true, right? It's just it's a throwaway. Well,
It's
for
like, it's
me,
almost like
I'm always
culturally,
going to
like
tell you.
that's like the assumption. Like if someone says something besides like, I'm doing good, you're like, wow, weirdo, way to open up the floodgates.
Yeah. So, but for me, I'm very authentic because when I ask someone how they're doing, I really would want to know. And so if someone asks me, I'm going to tell them what's really going on and how I'm doing. That's
Love
just
it.
who I am. I'm authentic. If I'm going to ask, yeah, if I ask someone,
You actually want to know
it's
the
because I
answer.
care. I actually want to know. And so I give that as well.
Cool. So sold Cutco, played hockey. You were a goalie. Okay. And
Mhm.
then like at what point did you feel like, wow, you look in the mirror and you're like, hey, I feel like I am not living my healthiest life. I need to make a change. Like what spurred that on for you?
Yeah, it actually went back probably the first time I really considered it was actually in 2018 or so, 2017, 2018. I was
We'll take your word
in
for
North
it.
Carolina. Thanks. I was in a North Carolina working an engineering job, selling as well. So I kind of work in both areas, and balance both. Um, and so I was working down there, and I went to the Front Row Foundation Family Summit, which was an incredibly transformative experience. And that's actually where I met Alex Hayden.
I see you got your front row
And
dad's shirt on, by the way, right now.
yeah, yeah, I love that.
Shout out to the front
And
row dads in the audience.
yeah, super grateful for that community too. But I would also, but getting back into it, we did some yoga, and he just kind of noticed that I was maybe struggling. And I guess I probably was in a little bit of denial about, was I in shape? Was I like, how was I doing? Right. Because as you get off track, it's hard to be honest to yourself. Um, Maybe I should have known when I wasn't really getting a lot of matches on dating apps, but whatever, right? Maybe I didn't pick up the hint, right? So he just came from like a really good place of like, hey, like, I noticed this or that, and if you were interested at all. And so that's kind of what started it for me, my journey. And I really wasn't living healthy. I wasn't eating healthy. I was eating deliciously, right? Like, oh, this is delicious, let me eat it. And just making those decisions about um, just not living in a good spot. Part of it was I didn't really like that job. I didn't feel valued. I had a manager that wasn't, well, not only did he not see the value in me, he certainly actually didn't even like me. So one time we had a meeting, he's like, yeah, I actually do have a problem with you. And I was like, oh, perfect.
Cool.
So
Thanks for
it
bringing
was
that up.
just
I really
funny.
appreciate it. So like,
Yeah.
I really like what you were asking yourself, like you said about eating deliciously rather than eating healthy. Because I feel like a lot of times when we're choosing the foods, we're always asking ourselves a question. And for most of us, that question is, what do I want to eat? What sounds good right now? Right. So like, what was that question for you before?
Mhm.
And then what's that question for you now? How has that changed?
Yeah. So I would say for me, in going through, his program, doing coaching with him, and then transitioning into your program a few years later, the biggest change for me was it's more of a balance between what is this tasting like, or what do I want to eat flavor wise, craving wise, and what do I want to get from this? And when I put these ingredients together, this dish together, when I stack it up, what am I getting? Sometimes it truly is just like, for me, a math equation, right? I add this plus this, that's a great meal. And then I find a way to make it taste good. But sometimes, right, like we indulge ourselves like, hey, that's cheesecake. Don't normally eat it, but I'll eat it this time,
Tell me a
right?
little bit more about your
So
math
it's just
equation. Cause
being
I feel
more
like a lot of us
intentional.
are like on that same path where it's like, oh yeah, like give me just the basics, like this plus this. How do you do that in your head, especially like in the moment?
Um, well, I mean, it comes mostly from your program, right? So like the $1 Million Body program, where you break it down into what's a carb, what's a fat, what's a protein, and then veggies, right? So for me, it's just being able to identify what I'm looking at, identify kind of the portions that I'm looking at, and understanding that I have to have a lot of water, right? So it's very rare that I'll have soda. I'm not a big alcohol person. And so it just makes it a little easier for me. But it's just like, all right, when I have a meal, I'm gonna have a big glass of water. I'm gonna have, whatever meal it is, depending on what it is, I'm just more strategic with it,
I
as
love it. I
far as
love this.
understanding that balance that hits your framework.
Yeah, I love that like idea of like a framework or an equation. And I love the idea about being strategic with your meals. And then kind of what you said about like figuring out what fits what you're looking for. And then how do you make it taste good? So adding spices, adding sauces kind of on the back end of those things. But can you let us know like a little bit like how much weight did you end up losing? How like all in all, how much are you down? Because I know we were talking earlier about you doubled down on the freshman 15 because you're an overachiever. You went for the freshman 30. And then what like how much did you end up losing?
Yeah. So when I got to college, I was 175. I felt like I was in great shape. And I was 18. And I literally did not get back down to 175 until a decade later, which is hilarious. Kind of sad, but that's what happens. And at my heaviest, I want to say I was pretty close to 240. So just not exercising, not eating right. And, there's some mental health stuff in there too, right? Like you don't always feel like you're in a great spot in life. So probably didn't help. So
How did you feel like when you were like starting to make that change? Like where were you where you were like, okay, enough's enough. Time to switch it, like time to switch the narrative up. What was that like?
yeah, I think the big thing for me is the the program that you put together is pretty simple. It's like step by step, do this, do this, do this. And so for me, it was just, oh, okay, that's easy. I think a lot of times there's so much information about nutrition and what you should eat, shouldn't eat, exercises you should do, shouldn't do. Are you going to run a ton? Are you not? You got to think about all those things. But what I liked about your program is it was very like simple steps. And so for me, I started doing it. I'm just like, all right, I'm gonna trust that it works. And then I do it. And then I started kind of getting results pretty fast. And it wasn't even just results about like, did I see weight drop? It was also I'm feeling different. And then also just like feeling empowered with each decision. Right.
That's
So
awesome.
there's that correlation. Like when you wake up and do your workout, that feeling that you have after your workout, you're like, oh yeah, I feel good. Those endorphins hit you. And then you're also like, yep, I did a good thing today. I did my workout today. So
So I
it
love what
kind of
you're
just
talking about. Yeah, like kind
provided
of
confidence.
the what you're feeling like afterwards. You have a little bit more energy, those endorphins hitting, you're getting some like the confidence, you're building the self-esteem from that esteemable action. When you look back from where you are right now to where you were, like, do you identify any big shifts where you're like, oh, because like I feel like a lot of times people will tell me, I didn't even realize it, but I felt like I've had a cold for the last decade because I didn't even realize how it felt to feel good. So I've heard that before. Like in your experience though, Jared, when you look back, are you able to identify like, oh man, I wasn't at my best, or kind of how did you feel before that transformation?
Well, I think I think overall the biggest thing for me is just focusing on what matters and learn like honestly growing up, right? Like early, late 20s, like was I focused on the things that matter? Was I think it was easy for me to ignore how unhealthy I was because I kind of just was looking at the wrong things. Once I had a kid, fell in love, the moves and the jobs, like some of that other stuff, just a lot of that other stuff just falls away and you realize what really matters. And so part of it's just growing up and getting more serious and understanding what is important. Um, so yeah, I would say the biggest thing for me is I don't, I guess in the past, I was mostly ignorant about how unhealthy I was and also how important it was that I was unhealthy,
Hmm.
right? There was probably more denial and just ignoring it. Um,
What would your advice be,
so
Jared, for someone
now
who's kind of
I
in that
understand.
situation, like who's kind of in denial, didn't necessarily know whether that like what would you tell that person? Because it's hard to be like you can't necessarily be like, hey, you need to make a change if they're not ready to hear it. What would be like the catalyst, or what would you like bring to your previous self to be like, hey man, like time to get serious?
Um, I think the big thing was experiencing that first success, right? With once you get going in the right direction. So it's like, I guess like let's I would encourage them to consider, hey, if you were able to lose a few pounds or sleep better, like let's pick out a small little thing. What if we just started with this? Like, are you really happy with how much you sleep? Are you happy with how much you eat? Right? If we could just pick a small thing, because for me, it was a domino effect in all honesty, right? Once I started, being, like I said, in the 230s, in a matter of, I don't know, maybe a month or so, I can't even remember how quickly, but I lost 15 pounds. And it was just like, holy cow, like my clothes fit better. It's so funny now that I think back. I have this shirt that I really liked, and it had long sleeves. And I remember one day I must have just been so fat and didn't realize it. I like literally ripped through the elbow. Like it must have been so tight that like, and I was like, oh man, that sucks. And I didn't think anything of it. I was just like chunky, like a chunky dude. And my mom ended up like sewing it for me because she's super nice like that. She just like cut the sleeves off, so now it's a short sleeve, so I still have it. But like I didn't even realize it. Like in the moment I was just like, oh man, I must just have worn it too much. Like it didn't even occur to me. I was so like unaware that I was just heavier than I should have been. But like, but like I said, right, like to me it was a domino effect. um because you can't, I would say like you can't really imagine how you're going to feel when those changes happen, right? So, but it is like a world of difference. um I remember when I first got down even to 180, I was like, wow, I feel so good. Well, now that I've been down in the 160s, 180 feels like death, right?
That's
Because
crazy
I've
to think
experienced
about.
a much like if I it is, right? So like, so for instance, I was at 168. I went on my honeymoon, which was incredible. We went to Hawaii. I gained 10 pounds and I felt awful, right? And it's so funny because it's all about experience and
Awareness.
where you're at. For yeah, the first time I was at 180, I was like, this is incredible. Like I'm so much better at hockey. I'm so much faster, so much more agile on the ice because I'm 20 pounds less than I was last time I skated, um and then it just depends on where you're at, right? So that perspective. So I would say for someone just starting or considering it, pick like a small thing, right? Pick something small, pick something like just a little increment. And hey, if wonder how I would feel if I dropped X amount of weight, or if, how would I feel if I could run for 10 minutes straight, or, something small, right? Wherever you're at, and try to get to that place first. Because I remember even telling Alex when I first started coaching with him, one of the questions he asked me is like, ideally, where would you want to be? And I said 185. And this is again, like when I was 230, 235, 236, maybe even 240. I tried to avoid the scale after I took it that first time. I was like, oof. Um, and I was like, there's no way that's happening. I straight up told him, I'm like 185, that's impossible. Right. And now if I was 185, I feel like I need a gastric bypass.
So that's
I
really interesting,
wouldn't,
Jared.
by the way.
I feel like you've mentioned a couple things that were like, I love that you talk about bringing awareness to like how you feel at the lower weights. Cause like, it's like hearing a song lyric wrong for a really long period of time. And then you hear it right. And you can never go back to hearing it wrong again. Like once you have the awareness of what it feels like to live your life at 165 or 170, it's hard to go back to that 185, even though that was your previous goal. So I'm curious, like like you mentioned sleep, you mentioned energy, you mentioned confidence. What are some of the other things that you've experienced that you didn't even realize that would come as a part of the weight loss? Also, I do want to apologize. I keep cutting you off because I think we're like, you have like a 5-second lag. So I'm talking and then so my fault on that.
Yeah. So what I would say for other things I notice, I would say endurance a little bit for like any activity, right? Like everyday activities that you don't notice, right? um Whether it's playing with my daughter, um not feeling fatigue like maybe I would have used to, or um if for some reason I had to run somewhere. I'm not a big runner, but let's say for some reason I had to run, wouldn't feel super fatigued. um if you've ever helped someone move, right?
Mhm.
Like you might have a buddy who needs to move and you help them move, and you might notice like, wow, that was a lot easier than I thought. So I think just being genuinely surprised with the difference in your everyday activities, um, it was definitely the most noticeable when I was on the ice playing.
Mm.
But certainly really anything. Could be groceries, it could be, helping someone move something, it could be any number of things. And that's the thing you're not going to really realize. Um, the confidence is great. Uh, I guess it's funny because I really just did it for myself, right? I took it on myself, and it wasn't like, oh, I want people to tell me I look good. But then as I started losing weight, they're like, wow, you're really making progress. You're looking good. And it's not, that like never really mattered to me. But at the same time, you're like, oh, okay, well, that's nice to hear. No one was like, hey, Jared, well, my mom did tell me that I was looking fat, but whatever. But no one else, right? No one else was like, hey,
I
you
love your
look like
mom,
you've
Mama
gained a lot of
Farber.
weight. Um, yeah, yeah, so she was, it was funny, but so the funniest part is I met my wife when I was chunky like that. So like the photo is her apartment. Like she took that photo of me, at my full behemoth level, at like 235, 240. So she's seen it the whole time, and been there the whole time. And so it feels somewhat crazy that she fell in love with chunky Jared, and now she's here for less chunky, not quite ripped Schwarzenegger Jared, but definitely smaller Jared.
I
So
I think that's an amazing
it's
marriage
pretty
strategy,
awesome.
by the way. Like gain a bunch of weight, grow your beard and your hair out, find someone who likes you for who you are, and then tighten it all back up. And you're like, boom, look what you got. Bonus mode. Very wise of you. I
Yeah,
commend you on that.
yeah.
Any changes? Like I feel like a lot of people like who are listening to this podcast or here in the group are interested in like, yeah, fitness is great, but not a lot of people are just so amped on like push-ups. We're amped on financial success, being better like partners, being better fathers. Like you mentioned that like playing with your daughter, you have a lot more endurance for that. And I totally agree. Like I dropped a little bit of weight. Like it just, you can run in circles for so much longer, play chase or whatever. What else have you seen with like, relationships or your business that you feel like you didn't even realize was going to be a piece of this?
For me, I think it's just the foundational aspect to it, right? So when I set my day up by doing a little bit of exercise in the morning, so like your program, it's basically 20 minutes. When I knock that out, I'm able just to show up better. I have more energy, um, more focus. That routine really helps me. Um, and then I would say the other thing that's great about the program is fasting, I've become comfortable. So I actually did a fast after the Super Bowl because I definitely ate too much. So I just did a dinner to dinner, and that's really easy. Now, what's great about that is that helps me when I'm busy. That helps me when I might be in a customer serving situation and I don't have any food, or don't have time to go get food. And so like, well, I'm just gonna fast here for a little bit out of circumstance, right? And it's not a discomfort thing. And so just being able to reframe my hunger, right? Instead of being like, oh, I haven't eaten, I'm super hungry. It's like, oh, well, I don't have any food, but I fasted a ton of times, and, I'll eventually get something to eat. Not a big deal. My body knows how to do this. So
Dude,
it's
that's super
really
cool. Cause I
helped
think
me
there's
that
like
way for sure.
a lot of mental fortitude that comes along with that. A lot of like decreasing your reliance on some external thing to give you like comfort, right? A lot of us lean into food. We're like, hey, I'm uncomfortable, I'm sad, I'm emotional, whatever. I'm gonna have some food. But with that fasting element, what you just described is like, hey, I don't need that right now. My body's totally fine with this. I can handle it. So if you're in a position where you're like, I need another 6 hours here and I'm not gonna be able to have a chance to get food, you're like, that's no problem. No pasa nada. I got this. So I love that because that's something that people don't even think about until they're kind of in the position you're at. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah. Fasting for me really is a tool, right? I can bring it up and use it as much or as little as I want. I actually, so part of in Front Row Dads, there's a 60-hour water fast. And the first time I tried it, I really sucked and it didn't go well and I had to tap out. But I got like 30 some hours. And part of that was I didn't prep for it properly. But the second time I did it and it went well. And just like pushing my limit on that, just trying that new experience. I mean, a dinner to dinner fast is super easy, right? Even if I did a 48, even if I did, whatever, right? So if I have to, for some reason I'm too busy, I have to go. If I miss a lunch or miss a breakfast, like, okay, it just really makes it kind of no big deal. But then it's also like a toolbox, right? Like, let's say I go over to my in-laws and they have pizza. Well, like as much as I want to maybe grab some veggies out of the freezer and just eat that and not eat a lot of pizza, it's possible I'm going to eat a little too much pizza. So I just pare back on maybe breakfast, or maybe I skip it, or I'm able to recalibrate. It's like it's that tool.
Awesome. I love thinking about things in that way. Like you've mentioned, like framework, math equations, using this as a tool. And I just think that a lot of us who are like kind of that logical side of like our brain, where we get overwhelmed with things in nutrition, where there's so many conflicting pieces of information, keto, paleo, veganism, all these things. And we're like, what's real? But like, it sounds like you've not just necessarily picked up a dogma, but you've picked up a lot of different tools that fit you and your life that you can apply as needed. And you don't have to necessarily be like, I'm paleo or I'm this. You're like, I'm doing me with the tools that I've gained. So I love that. Sounds like if I want to kind of summarize some of the lessons you're saying is like, number one is start slow. Like even if you're like, I don't know if I need to lose weight, try to drop 5 pounds, see where that gets you. Try to run 10 minutes, see how you feel afterwards, because sometimes those little victories can lead to huge momentum. Number two, don't ask yourself necessarily, what do I want right now? But ask, how is this going to make me feel later? And then tweak that food that you decided on to be more delicious, which I'm reading as add more hot sauce. Number three, like fitness is not just about looking good and having like great biceps. It's about your endurance with your family. It's about having better relationships. It's about having more energy. It's about being like mentally and physically sufficient in yourself, not relying on these external sources. And then lastly, come up with a toolbox that suits you, suits your goals, and start and just keep bringing things in there from things you read, from coaches you work with, from different programs you follow, rather than being stuck to one dogma. Jared, thank you so much for coming on today. Anything you want to leave us with? Any soapbox stuff you wanted to drop on us before you go?
Yeah, I mean, I would say for me, if obviously, I work with Cutco products and those are great, but the thing that differentiates me and is that, and it's actually why I've kind of branded myself as the Knife Mensch, is that it's really the second word that's the most important, which is mensch. So to me, and this is something I picked up from my grandmother, who was a Holocaust survivor, she taught me a long time ago. She said, the integrity that you have and the type of person that you are is what matters most. If you reach success by stabbing people in the back, throwing people under the bus, and being a bad person, none of that success matters. So to me, from that moment on, that conversation on, that still sticks with me. It's all about, how am I being the person I want to be, showing up for the people in my life and the people I can help. That is always primary. And what I do, whether it's design a product or win a gold medal, it could be any number of things. All that other stuff is secondary to who I am. And so for Cutco, that's one of the things I love, is I think it's a great product. I think it really helps people. I think people really enjoy having a product that they can depend on for generations. And, it makes cooking fun. As I've gone through your program, the recipes, the just different things, just having the right tools to cook things. Like the other day I cooked chicken breast without any oil at all. I just cooked it in its natural juices because Cutco makes waterless cookware. And so that's how I'm avoiding fat. The chicken thighs already have fat, so I'm good with that fat. I don't need to add more fat to the fat.
That's a really good point.
Just like
Having the right pan
taking,
can kind of cut down on some of the like the oil usage. But man, I
yeah,
love what you said about the integrity, because like
and
you're right.
yeah,
Like at the
all
end of the
that.
day, whether you're designing a product, writing an email, filming a video, or selling some knives, people like it's all about who you are and who you show up as. You only have one name, and you better make sure that you treat it well, right? Your reputation is more important than anything else. So
Yeah.
if anyone's listening to this and they're like, hey, I want to do business with someone who is an authentic, high integrity individual, I'd really advise you to reach out to Jared. Jared, where can they get in touch with you though?
Yeah. So the best way to get in touch with me is email, which is actually just knifemensch@gmail.com.
Cool.
I also have a portal where you can find information about me, my mission, and my family a little bit. And actually, my family is my mission. I can share that a little bit, but it also shows you the catalog of what we have products wise. But really, Cutco is my vehicle to actually teach my daughter and any future children that we have about personal finance, about working hard. So all of the money I make there goes right into an account for my daughter Ava. So it's meant to be more of a teaching and a legacy situation. And yeah, I'm just really happy that I've been able to set it to that side and for it to serve that purpose, so that she's able to have a positive net worth, and I can teach her about making smart money decisions. So that's what it's been about for me over these last few years.
I love it. I love how that's changed, man. Like you are truly a family man with a business, Jared. That's something I really love about you. So you're truly like living in the front row as a dad. So man, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast, dropping some wisdom on us. Next time we'll have you back on and talk a little bit more about your grandma and your mom. Maybe just your mom wants to come on. I don't know. Mama Farber sounds like a hoot. So bring her.
She cooks from scratch. I'll tell you that. So she's old school. She just opens up the fridge, grabs stuff, throws it together. Not a lot of salt and pepper. I think she does use a little bit more oil now that I think about it, but that's okay.
Mama Farber's not having hungry man. We'll say that right now. We're drawing the line in the sand. All right, buddy. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate you. We'll talk to you very soon.